High Growth Coaching. I'm James Schofield, and in this podcast, we dive into the topic of business coaching. Each episode features expert coaches from the international technology company Siemens and beyond, tackling real-life challenges such as team conflicts, procrastination, and making tough decisions. Join us for insightful case studies and practical solutions to help you and your coaching clients become the best version of yourselves. And make sure you stay tuned until the end for a summary of key takeaways from this episode. Now, today's session is about training leaders to coach, and I want to introduce Melanie Seguin, a respected figure in the field of coaching from Siemens Health & Ears. About 10 years ago, HR departments worldwide realized that traditional management models were outdated, especially with younger generations. The concept of leader as coach emerged, but its practical application was unclear. Melanie addressed this issue by creating and running an in-house coaching course to teach managers basic coaching skills. So let's meet her and find out about what she created and what the program has achieved. Melanie, I've already introduced you to the listeners, but can you tell us a little bit about this coaching training program for leaders in Siemens Health & Ears that you created? And first of all, why did you decide this was necessary? And what was the course like?
Thank you, James, for having me. And thank you for your lovely introduction. So in 2018, several different departments really decided that coaching was one of the skills that are crucial for leaders for being successful in the future and making our company successful. So strategy and HR and our big lean community thought we should all have the same language, we should all have the same knowledge, and therefore it would be good if we could train all leaders to flex their coaching muscle. And this was the reason why we said we need to create something that's specifically also for Siemens Health & Ears, so that we all speak the same language, and over time everyone knows what we're talking about when we're talking about coaching. And what was the course like? We definitely said no one has enough time to go through a full-blown coaching training. So what would it be that would bring the most value to our leaders? What would be something that they could really use in their day-to-day interactions with their employees? And what could they really benefit from, and how much time would that take? So we did decide that if you wanted to do something really well, you at least needed 8 hours to get at least a grasp of what we were doing. And we also decided that it had to be really practical. So when everyone went back to their desks, they would feel confident to try something, because I think we all know the situation that we go to a training, that we enjoy it very much, that we have very good intentions, and then we come back and our email inbox is very full. And then we don't really use what we have learned. So those were sort of some of the guardrails that we tried to put into the design of the training as well. And so we came out with an 8-hour course for leaders. And in this course, we didn't have too much content on coaching and not too much theory, but really focused on practical application.
So were you training people how to use particular coaching tools?
Yes, but actually not too many, because we also said we really wanted to give them an insight what coaching really means, or what we as Siemens Health & Ears wanted to be understood as coaching. Because at the time, we sometimes still met colleagues who thought coaching was something how you could manipulate your colleagues. And of course, this is not what we wanted to. Didn't want coaching to keep this kind of stigma. So we really wanted everyone to understand that coaching is actually a method with which you can support others to find their own way, and how you could support them and how you could accompany them on their own learning journey. And this was really the most important. And we were really trusting that if everyone had this aha moment or this insight that you couldn't make someone else do something, but you could support them, and that this would be the largest benefit, just changing this way of thinking, that coaching is not something that will make you or help you make other people do what you want, but really supporting them in their journey and in something that is meaningful for them.
How many people have gone through the training over the time?
So this 8-hour training that we're speaking about, we have had overall, let me see, around 5,000 employees who went through this training up until today.
It's an amazing number. I know when you're developing a course, you find things that need changing after the first time you run it. Was this the case with you?
It actually was, because when we were thinking of designing the course, so many of the colleagues who had also, who were part of the design, we love coaching, and we've all been through essential coaching trainings. And there are so many wonderful facets, and there are so many things that you can know. And sometimes you feel you need to know, and you feel that it's the most important, like asking good questions and questioning techniques, or things like, being attentive to body language. And so again, we did the mistake that we tried to put too much content into these 8 hours. Of course, we really wanted to give everyone a full overview, but that's just not possible. So we came back after our first pilot and said, okay, let's really focus on what's really essential and give our colleagues more space to practice for themselves, because we all know that if we practice something ourselves instead of just listening to theory, that will make us really change our behavior over time. After the first pilot, we really took out some of the things that we had intentionally at the beginning had in there, and said, let's really just focus on the application.
What did you include?
So one thing that we included, like that was really our main image that we had, is that it's so important that within coaching, the coachee focuses on their goal, the coach focuses on the coachee. So we really also had that as an image in there, and we showed it again and again, because especially if we have leaders who coach their employees, very often in the conversations, both have a shared goal. So if they have a conversation together, they suddenly go into solving mode, and they both focus on the goal. And as soon, of course, as you do that, you're not coaching the other person anymore, and you're not concentrating on what might be important for the person sitting opposite you. So this was really something very essential in the course. And this is also an image that we bring up again and again. We then also had something that we called elements of a healthy dialogue, which we find very important to create this kind of trusted atmosphere within a conversation. So we said, for us, if you want to have a good coaching conversation, it's important that you build trust, that you listen, that you give time for reflections, that you have good questions, of course, and also that you are accountable for the conversation. And those were also like really big elements. And then, of course, we also offered some kind of structure as an orientation. We used the GROW model, which is like an industry standard, and everyone really knows it. So G for goal, R for reality, O for options, and W for way forward. But what we then added, because it was our Siemens Healthineers special creation, was a little S for steady progress, because this was something that was a strong wish from the from our lean colleagues, because they said, what about the steady progress? And what about being sustainable in our learning? And then we said, we can do whatever we want, really. So we had the GROW model and just added this little S at the end to ensure steady progress. But this is more or less, this is the structure that can be very helpful for you if you're new as a coach, or if you're new in experimenting with coaching conversations, and it gives you some structure. But honestly, I think these other building blocks, trust, listening, questions, reflections, and accountability to me, they are even more valuable.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that sounds like a very good basis for every manager, to be honest. What skills do you think the participants came out of the training with? When you reflect on the 5,000 that have come out,
Yeah.
do you feel that they have managed that the culture of the organization has accepted this approach? Has it adopted this approach? Can you see it in maybe employee survey results, things like that?
I think we can see it. And I think I'm not even sure if we can already speak of skills, but I think many of the participants in the courses had this aha moment.
Mm-hmm.
This, other people might think quite differently from myself. And another aha moment that was also very important, and also something that was sometimes quite a bit of a challenge in practicing the coaching conversations, was even as a leader or even as a manager, I don't have to know everything. It's totally okay if I explore what other people have to say, and they also might have good solutions. And I think this was sometimes challenging because I was over years socialized in a way that it's always good to have a solution. The moment you get asked a question, you get asked a question and you have a solution. And this is how you are incentivized. And even in schools nowadays, like the teacher asks you a question, and the faster you have a solution or an answer, the better. And of course, if you go into this kind of coaching mindset, you don't have to provide the solutions. You don't have to know everything. And this can be quite a relief, because not all responsibility lies on your shoulders. But of course, it can also be a little bit scary if this is something you need to let go of as a leader as well.
I have to admit, it was one of the things I found most difficult when I was training to be a coach, was because having worked for a long time as a teacher and then as a trainer, where you were the expert in the room, and suddenly you weren't the expert in the room, and even if you had any ideas, you shouldn't provide them, you shouldn't give them, because they weren't coming from the coachee, and therefore they had less chance of being adopted or accepted or implemented. And that was a very tough lesson for me to recognize. And also, actually, I particularly remember one occasion where it seemed to me that it was an obvious answer what the coachee should be doing. I didn't say anything. And the coachee went through 3 or 4 different options, and I thought, okay, and including the one that I thought was the correct one. And he went away, and he came back the next time, and I was convinced he was going to come up with answer C as to what he had done. And he said, no, I did not. I took solution A, and it really worked well. And I thought, James, it just goes to show it's, as a coach, you have to keep your mouth shut.
Absolutely. And this is also my experience. And I also, from time to time, even experience that they come up with a solution that I would have never, ever thought about. And those, to me, are actually also the most fun moments. And I think this is really one of the experiences that we could provide to our leaders, even during the training. And this is a takeaway that they really, took away with them. And at the same time, it's the most challenging thing. So after we let them practice in triads very often, so they get the chance to be the coach, be the coachee, because you also need to learn how to be a good coachee. That's the other side of the story. We are not only teaching them to be a coach, but also to be a good coachee. And to admit that you have a problem. This is also like a first step. You go to a coach and admit that you might not have the answer at the moment, or you might not have the solution. And then in their third role, they're an observer. And this is also what they find the most challenging, like holding back with their solutions and their own thoughts, and yes, fully supporting the other person.
Yeah. Can I be a little bit of a devil's advocate here?
Always, please.
Isn't there a bit of a conflict here? Because how can an employee go to their manager to be coached? The employer, they're all part of the same system. How can a useful coaching experience come out for a coachee if the coach is also part of that particular system as their manager?
It's an excellent question, James. And it's really also one of the challenges that you have as an employee and a manager, like choosing the right role at the right time. And this is actually also something that we discuss during the training, because of course, each and every one of us has different roles. And our leaders, we have to find like which roles we would like to see in our leaders. So one of them is being a leader. One of them is being a manager. One of them is being an expert. And one of them is being a coach. And I think we need to choose how we react depending on the context and on the situation. And this can also be a learning, like, when is it important that I, as a leader, act as a manager? If, for example, there's a fast decision to be made, or if there's some kind of crisis, that's a moment where I just have to take this decision. Or if I am the only person in the room who has this kind of knowledge, then I have to take the role of the expert. But what are the situations where it can be really helpful to explore and to coach someone, to really support them to find their solution, and then through that also allow a deeper kind of learning and a deeper kind of personal development. And one recommendation that we always give is, especially as long as you're trying to learn something new, try and be quite transparent about what you're doing. So one recommendation would be, after the course as well, tell your employees what you're doing. Because if they're used to them coming to you, asking a question, and you give the answer right away, it might feel very strange if suddenly you come out of the coaching course and suddenly go, and why is this so important to you at the moment? So really be transparent, and also admit, I'm actually just learning something new. And again, this is also a change in the culture and in the mindset, that you're not expected to be an expert and be perfect at everything that you do right away, but that you're also, even as a leader, you're allowed to learn something new. You're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to sometimes say, oh, that didn't work out that well. Can I try again? Because again, all of these things build trust.
Tell us something about the reaction and the feedback from these 5,000 participants. You said already that some of them, went into it thinking, aha, this is how I can manipulate my employees to do exactly what I want. And they must have been a little bit disappointed, or certainly would come away with a different view of everything. But just how did they feel about it? Did you have any resistance? Was everybody completely total fans?
No. We had quite different reactions, to be honest with you. It was very interesting because also the rollout in the different larger departments was quite different. So some really decided to have this as an optional course. So it was really just an offering. And of course, in those courses, everyone who came, they came voluntarily and because they were interested. And those courses flew from the very beginning. They were a lot of fun. People loved it. And so they went really well from the very beginning. Other departments decided that they wanted it to be mandatory for all their leaders. And there we had a little bit more of a pushback because, of course, it's an 8-hour course. And if you don't want to go 8 hours in your calendar, in your busy calendar, it already is a bit of a challenge. And then we had quite a few colleagues come in and they said, we've already been to a training 5 years ago and it didn't change anything. And we think this is a waste of time. And of course, there you really needed to also work with this kind of resistance and also include them. And I think this was also a really important part of the design. I spoke about it at the beginning that we didn't have that much content in this day, but really room for practice. And so for the facilitators of the course, we also had this kind of room to go already bring our own coaching mindset into this room and work with the participants and try to make sure that we could find out what would be helpful for them in that situation or in that moment. And I think once that you really hear those concerns and start working with them, that's already a first step. That was something that at least opened them up to listen and to engage during the course. And another thing that was challenging was really that many of these managers are in their position because they have proven themselves to be experts. And now you try to teach them to behave completely opposite. And that can also be a little bit frightening, to be honest, that if you've been successful because you're very good at being one thing, and then suddenly someone comes along and says, but no, forget all your expertise, forget all your knowledge, just concentrate on the other person. And it was also really inviting them that this would just be an addition to their skill set. They didn't have to let go of everything they knew. They didn't have to forget being an expert completely, and just showing that this also still had a lot of value. But if they engaged in learning something new, that they would just learn more and that they would gain something. And this really helped to also get those on board who were at the beginning very skeptical. And for me as a trainer, that was like the best thing that could happen. If you had someone who was very challenging at the beginning and so very outspoken, and then at the end of the course, they would say, oh, I would have thought this would have been really a waste of time, but actually I feel good about it and I'll try it. I'll try to do something different.
Yes, that's very satisfying. Yeah. What about the team members of these managers who went through the training? Did you ever get any feedback from them?
Actually, we did. We did get some feedback from quite a few, because also over time, we really opened it up. We opened the courses up to anyone who wanted to join. So after initially really focusing on the managers, because of course they have an impact and we had an expectation to them as part of their role to have coaching conversations, we said, actually, we also believe in peer coaching. And coaching is something that everyone can profit from. So we opened the courses up. And so even if you were like only a team member, you could then come. And one of the, well, there are actually two quite lovely stories, I think. One thing that happened was that I had a manager in my course, and he was really struggling. He was already a little bit senior, and at the end of the course, he said, this course was really interesting. I now understand what coaching is. I don't believe I can do it. I've been like purely a manager for too long, but I will encourage my team members. If they want to have a coaching, I will encourage them to go to a professional coach. I said, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. If he thinks he can't do coaching or he doesn't feel confident to do it. But then a year later, I met him at a conference, and he came up to me and he said, Penny, you can't believe what happened. I've just had my 360, and it's been the best 360 of my whole career. And my team members are telling me that I'm listening much better.
All right.
So even though they thought that and probably they didn't do any full-blown coaching conversations, but something in their mindset had changed. So they were asking more questions, and they might have been listening a little bit better. So this is something that changed. And another story that I can tell you is that we had a leader, and they loved the course so much that they asked us if we could facilitate a course for their team. So we did that, and the whole team went through the course, and they did a lot of peer coaching, and they loved it, and they really integrated it in how their team worked. And after half a year, we visited them again and asked them if they had any more questions or how it was going. And they also said that had really good feedback from their stakeholders, and somehow it was really the whole team had somehow improved in their collaborations.
Right.
But the funny thing was that maybe another year later, I had a manager in one of my courses, and they then told me like, I'm a new manager to this team, and they're really good and they're really engaged and everything. But they now sent me to this course because they've all been through the course and I hadn't been, and they're expecting me to coach them.
You're
So
right.
so there was a change in the leadership of this team. And yeah, they had gotten used to having a manager who would coach them or a leader who would coach them. And they really demanded it from their new leader too.
Wow. Okay. In a way that answers another question I have, which is, do you think it has a long-term impact on a manager's style? Is this something that, or does it have a 6-month shelf life and then people drop back into command and control, perhaps?
We all know that learning takes a long time, and especially when things get stressful, we go back to old behaviors, especially if we don't practice regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think very often, if I speak to colleagues who went through the course like 6 years ago, for example,
Mm-hmm.
they very often they would tell me like, okay, at the beginning, I really made sure that I had regular, I'd say full-blown coaching conversations with my employees. And after some time, that somehow petered out over time. So they wouldn't have that regularly. But I do think that something in their management style or in their leadership style changed.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the story that I told you about the manager who said, yeah, I won't do it. But somehow they did ask more questions and they did listen a little bit more closely. So I do think it has an impact.
And of course, HR departments around the world are constantly talking about the leader as coach rather than leader as director. And actually seeing it happen is, very satisfactory. Overall now, if you were applying the lessons that you have got from this initiative from within Siemens Healthineers, do you think in general it's important for a manager to have these coaching skills?
Yes, 100%. If we're looking at the world and if we're looking what's happening all around us, I think there's ever increasing complexity. And how do we deal with this kind of complexity? I think probably in the last century, it was okay to be the expert and to know everything and to be very versed in what every team member on your team did. But if we're looking at how fast our world is evolving, we cannot be experts in everything anymore. And we need to maybe relearn to trust our colleagues.
Right.
And we need to trust other experts. And we also, if we're looking at the younger generations, they are looking for flat hierarchies as well. So if you have a flat hierarchy, it's very likely that you have more people reporting to you. And you just simply, we are humans and we cannot be experts in everything that our employees might do.
Yeah.
So these coaching skills, really supporting everyone to thrive in their role and to give their best, that's a skill. I think it's one of the really few skills that will make us successful in the future.
Okay. Melanie, thank you so much for describing the program to us. And if anybody is listening here and they're part of Siemens Healthineers, this is something that you can still join. This is a course that you can still take part in, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're still running courses.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's still some demand. So hopefully we'll be running them for a little while longer too.
Okay. And also to anybody else who is out there who is interested in finding out a little bit more, feel free to get in touch with me and I will connect you with Melanie with your questions. Thank you very much for your time, Melanie.
Wonderful. Thank you, James.
And I hope that this course continues for many years to come and that in a few years' time I come back and I find that maybe 10,000, 15,000 people have been through the system, because it sounds to me just exactly the kind of thing that any self-respecting organization should be running.
Thank you so much.
So terrific inputs there from Melanie about the benefits of training managers to adopt a coaching approach with their teams. What were the key takeaways from this interview? Melanie discussed the training program created for leaders at Siemens Healthineers, emphasizing the necessity of a unified coaching language and the importance of practical skills over theory. So far, the 8-hour course has trained about 5,000 people to adopt a coaching mindset, fostering better support and trust within teams. Initial challenges included an overloaded course content, which was dealt with by streamlining material to have more practice-oriented course content. The program has had a long-term impact on leadership styles within Siemens Healthineers, promoting trust and adaptability in a complex world. So that's all from this episode of My Growth Coaching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the podcast, please follow and give it a rating on whichever platform you use, and tell your friends about it too, especially if you think some of the ideas we discussed could be useful for them. After all, sharing is caring. I'll be back interviewing more great coaches about their experiences soon, so keep your eyes and ears open, and until then, take care and goodbye.